Chad Hasty Show, News Talk KFYO. We've got a lot of stuff happening, popping up in Texas news, and when that's happening, we always like to visit with our good friend Scott Braddock, editor of Quorum Report. Scott, good morning. How are you today?
Doing well, Chad. Good morning. How are you?
Doing well. There's there's some things popping up this morning, some interesting things that happened over the weekend, and I guess we'll start with Julian Castro, as we discussed him, last week, right? Yeah. Julian Castro announced last week that he's no longer running for president. And then today he announced that his endorsement of a candidate.
Yeah, he's going with Elizabeth Warren, who, as you know, does have some Texas ties. She was from Oklahoma originally, went to the University of Houston, which she called a commuter school. By the way, it was a commuter school back when she went to it.
Yeah.
Castro and Warren, there was no, hiding the fact that, these are candidates who do appreciate each other. That was already true earlier. You may remember that it was Castro who sort of acted like attack dog in some of these debates, going after various people. And you have to wonder if some of this was worked out ahead of time, that maybe he would end up being the attack dog for her later. We'll see if he, takes on a role like that. As we talked about last week, him being attack dog is really a shift for him and his brother. I mean, both of them throughout their political careers, Chad, had been sort of criticized. And this is one of the things that they hated the most, especially from those of us in the media, whenever we would ask the Castro brothers about their sort of reluctance to really, get out there and be aggressive about anything. Cautious is the word that we would always use for the Castros, right? And this past year, that was not true. They were both, very aggressive with the congressman and his role in the impeachment hearings. Yep. And his brother on the campaign trail, attacking Beto O'Rourke, attacking others as well. Just a real shift from them, in the way they're operating. So maybe he would be well suited to be an attack dog for Warren. Watch out for that. But in the meantime, it's all just sort of positive, happy-feely sort of stuff about how much he appreciates her and she appreciates him. I'm not sure how much of a boost it gives her, immediately. Right now in this news cycle, you get a quick boost because you got the endorsement of somebody who just left, although he didn't have much in the way of support in the polls, right? Isn't it funny how any of these candidates, and this comment is not specific to Castro, but when they drop out, suddenly they're very popular, and people say, well, why? They brought so much to the table, and, we thought they were, maybe going to go the distance here. But before that, of course, everybody was beating them up.
Yeah.
As soon as you're out, you don't have that target on your back anymore.
Kamala Harris's best week is when she dropped out of the race.
Yeah, that's right. She brought so much to the race, and everybody wanted to talk to her about the direction of everything. So where Castro goes from here, who knows? He's still relatively a young man, could run for something else. He'll probably run for something here in Texas. And I think the Castro brothers probably, I've said this before, they were probably kicking themselves a little bit over not having run for something statewide in 2018, because they would have been, either one of them would have been sort of a known quantity in Texas, whereas Beto O'Rourke had to sort of carve out his own thing, came really close to beating Senator Cruz. There's some speculation that if Joaquin Castro, for example, the congressman, had run for attorney general in 2018, he might have actually been able to win. There was a guy who ran against Ken Paxton, who you probably can't even remember his name, a guy named Justin Nelson, who spent something like $4 or $5 million, something like that. Castro's probably could have raised more than that, and actually would have brought some name ID to the race from the beginning, and could have actually punched through. So, is the next statewide cycle, coming up in 2022? Is that when that happens? We'll see.
I had a question a listener who sent in this on the text line. Have a question. How can a loser endorse anything? And Scott, to me, this it sets and again, I think you probably disagree with me a little bit on this. I think from the outset, Julian Castro was running for vice president. I think that's what his. Would he have loved to have been president? Yes, but I think reality was he was probably running for cabinet or VP, something that he was, I think, in line for if Hillary Clinton, he was kind of on a short list for Hillary back in 2016.
Absolutely.
This endorsement for Elizabeth Warren, it does set him up nicely for a VP possibility. It's geographically, it works. She's Northeast. He's Texas, and young Hispanic guy can maybe attract some people that she can't to the Democrat Party. That's kind of interesting there.
Yeah, I think so, and I don't know that we necessarily disagree all that much. It's in my list of things that you can accomplish by running for president, without winning. As you can be the VP, you can be in the cabinet, you can move the needle on policy positions, et cetera. I think that Castro probably was always pretty clear-eyed. He's a pretty savvy guy. I mean, he's a smart guy. I don't think that it's all or nothing with somebody like him, whereas I do think that's the case for some of the other people who have run for president more recently. A lot of these folks also had some other job that they were already going to fall back on, right? Like Kamala Harris, who you mentioned, she's a United States Senator. Same thing for Booker, same thing for Klobuchar. But Castro, figuring out his way forward, he needs a gig if he's going to be in public life, and so I don't think he would say no if Warren, was to win the nomination, then maybe win the White House, and being the VP, pick, even if the ticket doesn't win, sets you up for other things, right? And so, it's just such a high perch, for anybody in American politics, and it'd be, foolish for him to not be interested in that.
Can you remember? Right now, Elizabeth Warren, she's kind of falling in the polls. Bernie Sanders is going higher and has the momentum. Did Julian Castro ever attack? I know he attacked Biden, and he went after Biden pretty hard.
Right.
Did he ever go after Bernie?
Not that I can recall. I don't remember every single thing that he said. His main targets, as you point out, were Biden, along with Beto O'Rourke, and one of the it's kind of funny, sort of the legacy piece for Castro in his actual race for the presidency was sort of kneecapping Beto O'Rourke in that first debate where they went up against each other. No, not with Sanders as much. Biden's still in that position. I'm looking at the national averages right now for the polls. Biden's still out there out front, but of course we don't nominate people, in the Republican or Democratic Party based on their national polling. It's how they're doing in these individual states. It's important to point out that Castro had one of the most aggressive operations in Iowa of any of the candidates, which of course is first here. And Iowa is where you see surprises, right? I mean, that's where you saw Ted Cruz win when maybe people didn't think that might happen. It's where you saw Obama win, which was actually kind of a shocking thing at that time in the 2008 cycle. And because some of these operations in Iowa, they kind of run under the radar, some of them do, for what's happening national media. You've got lots of reporters there, of course, but they can't be at every single little diner and every little event that they go to, at every little house party that they go to. And a lot of these operations, the field operations, everybody block walking, knocking on these doors of people, these strike teams you hear about, like when Governor Perry was running for president, and lots of, Texas Republicans would go to Iowa and other places trying to get him elected president. Some of that does run under the radar. And so he's got an operation, Castro does, in that first caucus state, which he can now, reactivate that for Warren, which would be a big help to her.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the Democrat Texas Senate race, which is always fun. It took an interesting turn this weekend, Scott.
Yeah, it did. I was watching this unfold and just sitting back and, usually, Chad, and it might be controversial to say, but I'm used to seeing such stupidity play out usually in Republican primaries in Texas. There's always, some ridiculous fight that breaks out. And if suddenly we've got Democratic primaries all over the place. This is going to happen, in Texas House races and in the Senate race for sure. You have Christina Sinzun Ramirez, who is lives in Austin, and formerly, a workers' rights advocate, who told some folks in Dallas, and this was quoted in the Dallas Morning News, that her name, Sinzun, is more Mexican than other Mexican names like Garcia or Lopez. And people asked, what does that mean, that she's more Mexican than they are? And she said something about not being some of the only indigenous people to not be, defeated by the Aztecs. And I was wondering if this was just sort of a one-off comment. She might be, this happens, Chad, right? When they go to a lot of these different events candidates do, and they say all sorts of things. And it might get quoted, and they go, okay, wow, that's interesting. I was told this is something she says all the time.
That she's more Mexican than...
That her name and her lineage is more Mexican than a lot of other folks who are Latino. Right, yeah, who are Mexican. And that went over like a lead balloon with Mexicans that I saw commenting on this over the weekend, really outraged, wondering what in the hell. I mean, basically the comments were, "What the hell does that mean?
Yeah,
that you're more Mexican than I am." And this, I think, Chad, it really speaks to one of the weaknesses, a serious weakness of the Democratic Party. This is not just me saying this, obviously, but everybody has to be so woke. They're the most this, they're the most that. I'm the most progressive. I'm the most interested in climate change. I'm the most, we've seen these purity tests on the Republican Party in the Republican Party, on display in Texas for many years, right? I'm the most pro-life. I'm the most this. I'm the most fiscally conservative. All that sort of stuff. On the left, the Democrats, they have their own purity tests. They're the most this and they're the most that. And this is just a natural extension of what happens when you always have to be the most extreme about anything, and then you add on top of that the identity politics of trying to be the candidate who's reaching out to Latinos. We say, well, I'm the most Latino. I'm the most Mexican. And, of course, the backlash to that from Mexicans is what, may cause this candidacy to spiral out of control. I saw where Sinzu and Ramirez were doubling down on this on Twitter over the weekend and saying, well, some people are saying that I am too Latina, that I am too Mexican. I don't think anybody said that. I think that what had been said was she said that she was more Mexican than other people. So didn't go over well. Of course, as we've talked about, it's very early in this race. So I don't know that any of these candidates have committed any sin so far that's going to disqualify them, but this is not good right out of the gate.
Scott, when I saw, because I saw her tweet where she said that people say that I'm too Latina, too Mexican.
Yeah.
I went, nobody knows who you are. No one is saying that at all. Right. Because no one knows who she is outside. Maybe inside Austin, people know her.
Sort of, yeah.
But outside of Austin, nobody knows who she is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the part of the race where they really need to, all these candidates need to be introducing themselves in a positive way to voters. One of the fundamentals, Chad, of running a campaign when you're unknown is you have to get known, right? You need to have name ID, is what you're talking about. You got to, introduce your policy positions to people and things like that. And you can't really go on the attacking almost anyone. Certainly any of the other candidates in the race, but the entire ethnic groups that you're more Mexican than they are, probably not wise. Yeah. You need to have positive things first and build up the positive image that you have as a candidate first before you can be negative. And the tone of that was sort of very negative. I'm being attacked this way and I'm being attacked that way when all of these candidates poll. I think if you look at the polls that had been made public toward the end of last year, either unknown or something like I haven't made up my mind yet. Those were all polling higher than any of these folks who are running against Senator Cornyn.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Scott, tell folks what they can find at Quorum Report today.
We'll be tracking everything that's happening with your state government. Our publisher, Harvey Kronberg, has a fascinating piece coming out a little bit later this afternoon about this fact, Chad, the scandal with Dennis Bonnen, the speaker, last year, puts us on track to have maybe 3 back-to-back-to-back speakers races in Texas legislative sessions, which no one can ever remember that happening. If we have a Democratic takeover of the House, because of this election and next year, that would mean we had a speaker elected this past year, another one, and another one after that, and then another one if Republicans take the House back after that. So he's sort of wargaming all that out. Oh. You can check out, what's going on with that and what that really means for the institution and for state government. We'll let you know at quorumreport.com. You can sign up for our free emails there at quorumreport.com. It's always real news, not fake news, at quorumreport.com.
Very nice, Scott. As always, appreciate your time.
Thanks, my friend. Talk soon.
Have a good week. That's Scott Braddock, editor, Quorum Report, here on the Chad Hasty Show.